Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, pouring your coffee, turning on the news, and suddenly discovering that the ancient Peruvian shamans were actually right all along.
Right. Not the Pentagon, not the defense contractors.
Exactly. Not Lockheed Martin or these endless congressional subcommittees, but a 15,000-year-old oral tradition from the high Andes, because tomorrow is May 8th, 2026.
And depending on which corners of the internet you frequent, that date is circled in bright red ink.
Oh, absolutely. It is the potential date for a massive, completely unprecedented government disclosure regarding non-human intelligence, aliens,
Yeah.
UFOs, UAPs, whatever sanitized acronym the Defense Department is feeding the press this week.
The anticipation surrounding this specific date is just palpable. I mean, there's this collective holding of breath across the global media right now.
Yeah, everyone is expecting some paradigm-shattering admission that we are not, and honestly have never been, alone in the universe. But here's the thing, and this is exactly why we are doing this deep dive today. If that veil actually drops tomorrow, the 24-hour news networks are going to instantly drown you in terrestrial anxiety.
Oh, 100%. They will obsess over the political angles, right? The military threat assessments.
The scramble for technological supremacy.
Yeah, just the sheer geopolitical panic of it all. And if you are listening to this, you already know how that circus operates. You really don't need us to rehash the congressional oversight talking points. So we are taking a completely different path today.
We are exploring this impending reality through a spiritual and shamanic perspective, specifically relying heavily on the insights, teachings, and the extensive research of shaman Jon Rasmussen.
Right, because our mission today is to help you process this news. And I mean, it's news that fundamentally alters human history. But we want to help you process it not through the lens of government paranoia, but through a grounded, ancient, and highly practical spiritual framework.
Which is arguably the absolute most necessary counterbalance to the modern narrative right now. Yeah, because Western society when we introduce the concept of non-human intelligence, our immediate reaction is shaped by a century of science fiction.
Right, science fiction and military-industrial posturing. I mean, we have been totally conditioned to expect either an apocalyptic invasion that we have to shoot out of the sky or, benevolent cosmic saviors descending to fix our atmosphere for us.
It's always one extreme or the other, but the shamanic tradition offers a paradigm that is infinitely older, it's incredibly nuanced, and it is entirely focused on empowering you as a sovereign individual navigating a vastly expanded reality.
I love how you phrase that, navigating an expanded reality.
Well, I was trying to figure out how to frame the sheer psychological weight of this for the listener, and I kept coming back to this idea of a hidden basement.
Oh, I like this. Go on.
So imagine you have lived in the exact same house your entire life, right? You know the architecture. You know every single creak in the floorboards.
You know exactly how the light filters through the kitchen window.
Exactly. It is your entire known world. Then, on a random Tuesday, you lean against a bookshelf in the hallway, the wall clicks, and it just swings open.
And there's a staircase.
Right. You find a hidden staircase leading down to this massive, sprawling, fully furnished sub-basement you literally never knew existed. And the craziest part is there are people down there.
There's an entire ecosystem operating right beneath your feet.
Yes. And the initial shock is absolute. I mean, it completely shatters your understanding of the boundaries of your own home. But here's the critical part, the part about mentally integrating a new reality. At the end of the day, when your heart rate finally slows down...
You still have to wake up the next morning and pay the mortgage on that house.
Yes. Your dog still needs to be walked. You still have to do the dishes.
That tension between the extraordinary and the ordinary, that sits right at the very heart of Jon Rasmussen's central thesis.
Which is so grounding when you think about it.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because when you look at his teachings on extraterrestrial disclosure, he essentially strips away the hysteria. He fully acknowledges the reality of these beings, but his core message to the public is that knowing, having it confirmed on television by officials, won't actually change the physical mechanics of your day-to-day reality.
Right.
The mantra he offers for navigating this specific moment in human history is unapologetically grounded. He just says, keep calm and carry on.
I have to admit, when I first read that, it felt like profound psychological whiplash.
How so?
Well, we have been entirely conditioned to believe that the moment a White House official steps up to a podium and says, "We are not alone," the Earth will literally stop spinning on its axis.
We picture the stock market flatlining.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Millions of people pouring into the streets. We expect the absolute cessation of all mundane human concerns in the face of this cosmic revelation, the ultimate disruption.
But Rasmussen is emphasizing that these intelligences have been here all along.
Okay.
They aren't arriving tomorrow. We are just, officially finding out about them tomorrow.
Right.
Therefore, knowing about them doesn't alter the fundamental mechanics of your Tuesday morning commute.
Because the commute is still the commute. But mentally, it's a lot to process.
It is. And he is addressing a phenomenon that psychologists actually call ontological shock.
Ontological shock. Let's break that down for the listener.
So ontological shock is the total collapse of your worldview when you suddenly realize the basic foundational rules of reality aren't what you thought they were.
Like waking up in the Matrix.
Essentially, yes. When a person experiences ontological shock, their brain basically goes into a freeze response because it has zero historical data to process the new information.
It just blue screens.
Exactly. So Rasmussen is trying to provide that historical data. He points to massive paradigm shifts in human history to prove that we have survived this exact type of shock before.
Okay, what kind of historical shifts?
Take the moment humanity definitively proved the heliocentric model. The realization that the Earth was round, spinning, and orbiting the sun, rather than just sitting stationary at the center of the universe.
Oh, right. That was the ultimate existential crisis for the institutions of the time. I mean, the religious structures were threatened. The philosophical understanding of mankind's special place in the cosmos was completely upended.
People suddenly realized they were clinging to a wet rock, hurtling through an infinite void.
Which sounds terrifying.
And yet, what actually happened the day after that realization became public knowledge? The philosophical weight was staggering, sure, but the farmer still had to bring in the harvest.
The blacksmith still had to forge iron.
Yes. The biological and societal imperatives of human life did not pause for the philosophical revelation. Rasmussen also uses the discovery of microbiology in germ theory as a really key parallel here.
Germ theory. Okay, walk me through that comparison.
Suddenly, doctors and the general public were informed that there was an invisible, microscopic world of organisms swarming around us, living inside us, coating literally every surface we touch.
Ugh. Yeah, thinking about that in Victorian times must have been wild.
We were told that this unseen reality was operating parallel to our own, and that it had the power to kill us or keep us alive.
Okay, I hear the germ theory comparison, and I completely understand how terrifying it must have been for someone in the 1800s to try and wrap their head around invisible bugs. But I have to push back on Rasmussen here.
Go for it.
Germs are just biology. They are microscopic machines operating on pure instinct, but non-human intelligence is exactly that. It is intelligence.
Right.
It possesses intent. It has agency and highly advanced technology. I mean, if I find out my house is infested with termites, I just hire an exterminator and go to work.
Sure.
But if I find out a highly advanced conscious stranger has been living inside my walls for a decade, I call the police and I never sleep in that house again.
That's a fair reaction.
How can Rasmussen compare microscopic biology to a conscious, potentially vastly superior intelligence? Doesn't the element of intent change everything?
That is the precise friction point where the modern mind struggles. And honestly, it is exactly why the shamanic perspective is so incredibly vital.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Your reaction, the instinct to call the police and abandon the house, is rooted in a very anthropocentric view of intent.
Meaning I'm projecting human traits onto them.
Yes. You are assuming that a vastly superior intelligence operates with the exact same territorial, predatory, or invasive motives that a human intruder would have.
Oh, I see.
The germ theory comparison isn't about equating aliens to bacteria. It is about equating the revelation of an unseen layer of reality.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Before germ theory, illnesses were attributed to curses or bad air. Once we actually understood germs, we didn't abandon our bodies. We learned hygiene. We learned how to interact with that unseen layer.
We adapted to the new reality.
Exactly. Rasmussen is suggesting that discovering non-human intelligence requires a very similar adaptation. We discover the universe is vastly more complex and populated than we thought. We experience that brief period of ontological shock, and then we integrate it.
We learn cosmic hygiene.
Cosmic hygiene, so to speak.
Yes.
The rent is still due. The profound and the mundane must coexist. And we simply expand our understanding of the neighborhood.
I really appreciate how you framed that. Expanding our understanding of the neighborhood rather than fleeing the house in terror.
It changes the whole vibe.
It really does.
Yeah.
Because if we accept Rasmussen's shamanic premise that they have been here all along, the natural next step, really the absolute imperative for anyone trying to understand this, is asking, well, who exactly are they?
And how do they get here?
Exactly. And when I was diving into Rasmussen's breakdown, I was really struck by how specific the taxonomy is. He doesn't just speak in vague, flowery spiritual platitudes.
No, he is very precise.
He divides these entities into two very specific camps, relying heavily on the teachings of the Quero natives of Peru.
The context of the Quero is totally essential here. We are talking about an indigenous group residing in the high Andes of Peru. They are often referred to as the last of the Incas,
Why is that?
because they retreated high into the mountains during the Spanish conquest, and they remained virtually isolated for centuries, which allowed them to preserve a remarkably pure lineage of knowledge.
Wow, so they weren't influenced by outside religious or cultural shifts for a long time.
Right. The taxonomy Rasmussen shares relies on the verbal history passed down by shaman elder teacher Don Manuel Quispe. This isn't a theory synthesized in a modern university or a Washington think tank.
It's much older than that.
This is an observational record embedded in an oral tradition that dates back roughly 15,000 years.
Okay, let's hold on that 15,000-year timeline for just a second, because we are definitely going to unpack exactly how oral tradition preserves data over millennia in just a moment. But according to this ancient framework, the taxonomy divides non-human intelligence into two distinct categories.
The physical and the light forms.
Right. And what fascinated me is that the physical the metallic saucers, the tic tacs, the physical objects, our Navy pilots are capturing on their FLIR cameras, and that the Pentagon is stressing over the shamans actually view those as the lower tier of the two.
That is correct. The first type, the physical beings, are exactly what they sound like. They are material entities interacting with our dense material world through advanced technology that physically traverses linear space.
So they have actual spaceships.
They have crafts.
Yeah.
They require some form of propulsion, even if it is a manipulation of gravity that we don't yet understand in modern physics. They're essentially operating in the exact same physical sandbox that we are, just with vastly superior tools.
But the second type, the light forms, represent a complete departure from that material mechanics.
Yes. According to the Quero tradition, these beings appear as forms of light, and they do not travel across space in a constructed vehicle. They travel through portals in space and time.
Okay, talk to me about the mechanics of a light form, because that concept initially just kind of breaks my brain.
It's a big shift in physics.
It is, because when we hear the word portal, we immediately picture a glowing, swirling sci-fi wormhole tearing through the sky, like in a Marvel movie. But for anyone listening who is actively trying to deepen their own spiritual practice, understanding how a being operates purely as light is a massive key to understanding consciousness itself. So how does a portal actually function in this specific shamanic framework?
To understand the mechanism, we really have to stop thinking of travel as a physical displacement from point A to point B.
Okay.
In the shamanic worldview, the universe isn't just empty space filled with scattered rocks. It is a dense, interconnected web of frequencies. A portal is not a physical doorway you literally walk your body through.
Then what is it?
It is a shift in frequency. It is the ability of an advanced consciousness to adjust its own vibrational state to perfectly match the localized reality of Earth.
Wow.
When a being evolves to the point of becoming a light form, they have shed the dense biological and material requirements entirely. They exist as pure energy and intelligence. So they don't propel themselves across the galaxy with an engine. They tune themselves into our frequency, manifesting locally as light.
Okay, I want to try an analogy here to see if I'm grasping the distinction.
Let's hear it.
Think about the difference between taking a commercial flight to visit another country versus logging into a highly advanced virtual reality server.
Okay, I like where this is going.
The physical craft is the commercial flight. It's an incredible piece of technology compared to, say, walking, sure, but it is fundamentally bound by physics.
Great, it has mass.
The craft has to carry fuel. It has to navigate space dust and atmospheric entry. It is subject to the gravitational pull of the planets it passes. And the beings inside are physically confined to a metal hull moving linearly across the void.
Yes, all physical constraints.
But the light forms, they are more like the VR server. They aren't restricted by travel time or physical hazards. They simply access the localized reality Earth by projecting their consciousness directly through the underlying code of space and time.
Exact.
One is playing by the rigid rules of physical travel, and the other is moving seamlessly through the programming of reality itself.
Take that VR server analogy a step further, because it perfectly illustrates the evolutionary implications of this whole taxonomy.
Okay, how so?
In our Earth-centric view, evolution is tied entirely to manipulating physical matter. Humans went from chipping stone axes to forging bronze to burning coal for steam engines, and now we etch silicon for microchips.
Right, it's a very material progression.
We assume that an alien race is just a million years further down that exact same material path. We think they're just building faster ships out of stronger metals.
Which is why we look for their radio signals and exhaust plumes.
Precisely. But the light form suggests a completely different evolutionary trajectory. It implies that at a certain point of advancement, a species outgrows physical matter entirely. They evolve past biology and past metallurgy.
And this leads right into something Rasmussen specifically notes, which I found incredibly reassuring.
About benevolence.
Yes. The shamanic tradition generally views this second group, the light forms traveling through portals, as far more benevolent than the physical beings.
Right.
And if we look at the driving forces of conflict on our own planet, it makes perfect sense. I mean, why do humans fight wars? Why do predators hunt? It always comes down to resources, territory.
Yeah.
Survival.
Scarcity.
Exactly. Scarcity.
We are biological creatures tethered to a finite physical planet. We need clean water, arable land, caloric energy, and minerals just to sustain our bodies and our infrastructure.
We have to consume to survive.
If a non-human intelligence is still utilizing physical crafts, if they're still relying on material technology to cross the universe, they are, to some degree, still tethered to the physical paradigm of resource management.
Even if they are way more advanced than us.
Right. They might be highly advanced, but they exist in the same fundamental reality of scarcity that we do. They have bodies to protect, ships to maintain, and energy sources to secure.
So because they have a physical footprint, they might still operate with a sense of self-interest or territoriality, much like we do?
Yes, they are still playing the game of survival, even if they are playing it at a cosmic interstellar level.
Yeah.
But a light form, a being that has evolved past biology, traveling as pure consciousness through frequency portals.
They don't need any of that.
They are entirely unburdened by the economics of physical scarcity. They don't need our water. They don't want our gold, our minerals, or our land. They don't have biological imperatives driving them toward conquest or resource extraction.
They are beyond the need to take.
Therefore, an intelligence operating at that frequency naturally functions from a higher state of benevolence. They have transcended the very mechanics that cause malice, greed, and conflict. Their interactions with humanity wouldn't be driven by what they can extract from us, but by a desire to observe, to guide, or simply to share in the interconnected fabric of the universe.
Think about how drastically that flips the script on how you, listening right now, are supposed to view this potential disclosure.
It changes everything.
It really does. If you are terrified of an alien invasion, you are essentially projecting our own violent, resource-hoarding human history onto the cosmos. You are assuming the universe is just full of 16th century conquistadors with laser beams.
This is a very limiting view.
But Rasmussen is pointing out that the most advanced neighbors we have aren't even playing that physical game anymore. They aren't here to take your house. They don't even need a house. It fundamentally changes the emotional temperature of disclosure from fear to profound awe.
It is a deeply comforting thought, and it sits at the absolute foundation of the shamanic worldview. When you step outside the dense competitive frequency of pure physical survival, the spirit realm, the realm of light and consciousness is vast, cooperative, and deeply interconnected.
But this brings us to a massive epistemological hurdle.
The timeline.
Yes, we keep mentioning this 15,000-year timeline. Rasmussen says the queer elders have been passing down this exact taxonomy, this precise understanding of physical beings and portal-traveling light beings for 15 millennia.
It's a huge span of time.
For the modern Western mind, that shatters our accepted timeline of human knowledge. We think of recorded history as starting with the Sumerians maybe 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. How do we reconcile this ancient shamanic knowledge with what our textbooks consider legitimate history? I mean, how can we possibly trust a campfire story that is 15,000 years old?
We really have to deconstruct our modern epistemological arrogance here.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we live in an era where we believe that unless a piece of data is logged in a cloud server, published in a peer-reviewed academic journal, or stamped top secret by the Department of Defense. It just isn't real.
If it's not a PDF, it didn't happen.
Exactly. We view indigenous oral histories as myths, legends, or just whimsical campfire stories. But anthropologists and linguists who study these cultures understand that true oral tradition is a highly disciplined, incredibly rigorous form of data preservation.
So it's not just making up stories for entertainment.
For an oral tradition to survive 15,000 years intact, it cannot rely on casual storytelling.
So it's not like a game of telephone where the message gets garbled every single time it's passed down from person to person?
Far from it. In many of these ancient cultures, the transmission of sacred knowledge involves intense mnemonic devices, rhythmic chanting, and strict cultural penalties for altering even a single word of the history.
Wow, so it's locked in.
The elders who hold these stories serve as living libraries. They constantly cross-reference their knowledge with other elders to ensure absolute fidelity to the original data stream. When Don Manuel Quispe speaks of the light beings, he isn't making up a poetic metaphor for the sun.
He is reading from the archive.
He's reciting a cataloged observational record of non-human intelligence interacting with humanity. Rasmussen vehemently supports the idea that evidence of these beings is scattered throughout all of human history, a concept that has been comprehensively explored in media, like the television series Ancient Aliens.
And I know some people roll their eyes at that show, and while shows like that can sometimes sensationalize the data for entertainment value, the underlying archaeological and historical data they point to is very real.
The physical evidence is there.
Right. We are talking about ancient cave paintings in regions like Val Camonica in Italy, or the Wandjina figures in Australia depicting beings with halos of light or domed helmets. We're looking at the Sanskrit epics of ancient India detailing Vimanas, which are described in intense mechanical detail as flying chariots or aerial cities.
It's incredibly specific.
We have indigenous oral traditions across literally every continent describing star people coming down from the sky. The data points are everywhere if you just look.
And what we are witnessing right now, in the 21st century, is modern technology finally catching up to ancient wisdom.
Give me an example of that.
Take the UAP videos released by the Navy. The testimonies of fighter pilots like Commander David Fravor describing objects dropping from 80,000 feet to sea level in seconds without sonic booms.
The Tic Tac video.
Right. Modern scientific sensors are finally capturing on radar what the shamans have been interacting with and cataloging for millennia.
Think about how much permission you need to believe something today. If it isn't a verified post by a credible news organization or a declassified document from the Pentagon, you just dismiss it.
We want official validation.
We are all sitting on the edge of our seats, waiting for tomorrow's press conference, waiting for modern institutions to grant us the permission to believe in non-human intelligence. But we are completely ignoring thousands of years of human record keeping.
It's a huge blind spot.
Rasmussen is asking you to completely deconstruct how you assign truth to human memory. Why do we require a politician in a suit at a podium to validate what a shaman elder has been holding as a fundamental, rigorously protected truth for hundreds of generations?
Because we have falsely separated the alien from the spiritual.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Modern society demands a material proof for a material phenomenon. But the shamanic traditions never made that arbitrary division. To them, the cosmos is entirely populated with consciousness.
So it's all one big ecosystem.
The distinction between a spirit guide, an ancestor, an elemental force, and an extraterrestrial light being is fluid. It is a holistic understanding of a densely populated, interconnected universe. So, in the shamanic view, there is no disclosure happening tomorrow.
Right, because disclosure already happened. It happened at the dawn of human civilization. We just forgot, or we actively decided to throw the records in the fire because they didn't fit our modern industrial worldview.
We chose amnesia.
If you can frame tomorrow's news not as a terrifying, unprecedented disruption, but as modern society finally remembering an ancient reality, it brings an incredible sense of peace. You realize that humanity has coexisted with these intelligences since our inception. We survived them then, and we will survive them now.
This realization naturally leads to one of the most sensitive and volatile aspects of this entire conversation.
Religion.
Exactly, the impact on religion. If the evidence has been here for 15,000 years, and if these beings are real, there's a pervasive, almost existential dread in modern society that disclosure will break our spiritual beliefs.
Yeah, there is this massive assumption that if an alien steps out of a craft tomorrow, every church, mosque, and temple on earth will instantly crumble because human theology will be totally invalidated. It is a massive fear. People think it will be the literal end of faith. But Rasmussen tackles this directly, and his stance is incredibly empowering.
What does he say?
He insists that the existence of non-human intelligence does not destroy our spiritual frameworks. Instead, it enhances our understanding of creation without fundamentally altering our core beliefs. He uses this specific phrase. He says it folds right in as a natural extension of what we already believe about Earth, science, spirituality, and religion.
To understand how it folds right in, we really need to look at why we assume religion is so brittle in the first place.
That's a good point. Why do we think faith is so fragile?
That fear is based on a very fragile, incredibly human-centric view of the divine. We have placed humanity at the absolute center of the spiritual universe, assuming that the creator of the cosmos poured all of their attention, love, and spiritual mechanics solely into one single species on one small planet.
Let's look at the supporting context here, because Rasmussen isn't the only one saying this. He wrote extensively about this integration in his book Common Threads, but another incredible resource that perfectly illustrates this is the highly acclaimed book UFO of God by Chris Bledsoe.
Oh, that book is a perfect example.
And I just want to pause on the absolute brilliance of that title alone, UFO of God. It is a total collision of worlds. You take UFO, a clinical, sterile, almost paranoid acronym coined by the military-industrial complex, and you merge it directly with God, the ultimate expression of the profound, the mystical, and the divine creator.
It's a juxtaposition that really makes you think.
That title perfectly encapsulates Rasmussen's point about these concepts naturally folding together.
It forces a profound theological synthesis. Let's really delve into the theology of an expanded universe for a second.
Please do.
If you look at the core principles of most major spiritual traditions, whether you were examining Christian concepts of agape love, Buddhist understandings of karma and the wheel of life, Hindu concepts of Brahman or universal consciousness or indigenous reverence for the web of life, these are universally applicable principles of interconnectedness.
They aren't restricted to human biology.
Right. If a person truly believes in an infinite, boundless, omnipotent creator, why would they assume that creators stopped experimenting after making humans? Why would an infinite God have a finite canvas?
It's almost arrogant, isn't it?
Very much so.
It's basically an insult to the concept of the divine to say, nope, the entirety of this multi-billion light-year expanse is just empty space, and we humans are the only ones who get to have a soul.
It arbitrarily limits the divine to human proportions. Adding complexity to creation does not negate the creator. It actually magnifies the glory and the incomprehensible scale of the divine architecture.
That's a beautiful way to look at it.
Many theologians who study exotheology argue that the realization of a universe teeming with diverse forms of life and intelligence only deepens the mystery and majesty of God. If the spiritual principles of love, growth, and consciousness are truly universal laws, then they apply to the light forms traveling through portals just as much as they apply to a human being praying in a pew.
So for you listening right now, if you are actively working on building your own spiritual practice, the integration of extraterrestrial life should not be a stumbling block at all.
It shouldn't be something to fear.
No, it is actually a profound expansion of your empathy. Think of it as expanding your spiritual neighborhood. If your spirituality is rooted in the idea of connecting to all life, then non-human intelligence simply means the definition of all life is infinitely larger than we were taught in elementary school.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean your prayers go unanswered or your sacred texts are lies. It just means there are more diverse voices in the cosmic choir.
We see this exact expansion of empathy in Chris Bledsoe's experiences detailed in UFO of God. Without giving away the entire book, his encounters with non-human intelligences were not the clinical, cold, or terrifying abductions you see in sci-fi horror movies.
No probing or cold operating tables.
None of that. They were deeply mystical, physically healing, and profoundly spiritual events. The beings he interacted with did not hand him blueprints for laser weapons. They directed him toward a greater understanding of divine love, environmental stewardship, and human unity.
Which mirrors the shamanic experience perfectly.
Shamans do not interact with these energies as if they are biological specimens to be dissected. They approach them as spiritual relations to be respected and learned from. Disclosure does not break spiritual law. It reveals the true, vast scope of the spiritual ecosystem we have always been a part of.
Okay, I am totally on board with this beautiful, harmonious, spiritually expansive view of the cosmos. I really am. We have 15,000 years of unbroken history, we have benevolent light beings, and we have a theology that easily folds them into our understanding of the divine. It's a very peaceful, optimistic picture. But I have to bring us back down to Earth.
Ah, here we go.
We have to address the massive terrestrial elephant in the room. If this is all a natural spiritual progression, what is with the 80 years of intense secrecy?
The cover-up.
What is with the dark money, the massive compartmentalized Pentagon crash retrieval programs, the disinformation campaigns that genuinely ruin people's lives, and the endless, suffocating conspiracy theories? If the universe is just a big spiritual neighborhood, why has our government acted like it's an active cosmic war zone?
That is the necessary pivot from the cosmic to the geopolitical. Because while the reality of the phenomenon is deeply spiritual, the human reaction to it, specifically the reaction of the military and governmental authorities, has been entirely terrestrial, fearful, and utterly obsessed with control.
Which tracks with human history.
Rasmussen does not shy away from this at all. He addresses the earthly conspiracies head-on, and he provides a very clear, nuanced perspective on the true anatomy of the cover-up.
He makes a few definitive statements that we really need to parse out for the listener.
Let's go through them.
First, he explicitly states that disclosure is not a false flag created by the government. There is a massive conspiracy theory floating around the internet right now known as Project Bluebeam.
I've heard of that one.
The theory suggests that the global elite are going to use advanced holograms and secret technology to fake an alien invasion, basically terrifying the populace into surrendering all their rights to a one-world government.
Right.
Rasmussen completely dismisses that. He says the core phenomenon is entirely real and organically occurring. Second, he states that the physical crafts we are seeing are not built by Lockheed Skunk Works, Boeing, or any other shadowy earthly defense contractor. They are genuinely non-human.
Yes, he is firm on that.
But then he drops a really fascinating detail regarding the defense contractors. He says these organizations may be trying to secretly reverse engineer the crashed physical crafts they've recovered, but they will likely fail due to key missing elements.
This is where the shamanic perspective perfectly intersects with modern leaked intelligence and whistleblower testimonies regarding the UFO phenomenon. We have to ask, what exactly are those key missing elements?
Right. What are they missing?
If we look at the strictly material science approach, the approach of an aerospace engineer working in a classified bunker at Lockheed, they approach the problem with a wrench, a blowtorch, and a solid understanding of thermodynamics.
They treat it like a really advanced jet.
They look at a recovered non-human craft,
Yeah.
and they see a machine. They meticulously search for the fuel line, the exhaust port, the engine block, the wiring harness. But if we revert back to the shamanic taxonomy, we realize that true advanced technology is not distinct from consciousness.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you can't reverse engineer spiritual technology using purely material science.
Exactly.
I want to try a different analogy for this because that is such a wild concept. Imagine you find a grand piano in the middle of a forest and you bring in a team of incredible material scientists who have never ever heard music before.
Okay.
They can take the piano apart completely. They can measure the exact weight of the ivory keys. They can analyze the lacquer on the wood. They can calculate the precise tensile strength of the metal strings. They can reverse engineer the physical mechanics of the hammer hitting the string.
They map out the entire physical structure perfectly.
Yes, perfectly.
Yeah.
But without the concept of music, and critically, without the musician to sit on the bench and apply intent, the piano will never fulfill its purpose. It will just sit there, silent.
That is a brilliant way to capture the dilemma of the defense contractors right now. If some of these beings travel via portals as light forms, or if their physical crafts are actually operated through a direct psychic consciousness-based interface, then the physical machine itself is entirely inert without the specific spiritual frequency of the operator.
It's just a dead piano.
Exactly. The Pentagon might possess the physical hardware, the exotic metals, the metamaterials, but they fundamentally lack the spiritual software to turn it on. Their entire scientific paradigm is built on Cartesian dualism, the separation of mind and matter.
The observer is separate from the machine.
Right. But the shamanic paradigm is built on unity. The operator and the craft are a single, entangled, conscious entity.
So billions of dollars of dark money, decades of extreme secrecy, and some of the brightest engineering minds on the planet are basically being poured into a material solution for a spiritual puzzle.
They are banging wrenches against a piano, expecting it to play Beethoven.
No wonder they are failing. It's almost a cosmic joke. The very institutions that are most desperate to weaponize or monetize this technology are philosophically and spiritually barred from understanding it, precisely because of their reductionist, materialistic worldview.
It is the ultimate irony of the military-industrial complex. But that leads to the absolute most controversial assertion Rasmussen makes about this entire geopolitical situation.
Okay, brace yourself.
He fully acknowledges the existence of the coordinated cover-up. He knows authorities have hidden this truth out of fear of a chaotic reaction by the masses. But then he suggests a perspective that many in the disclosure movement find incredibly hard to swallow.
What does he say?
He posits that this cover-up may have been justified until now.
Wait, I have to stop you there because I know the listener is having the exact same reaction I am right now.
I figured you would.
Rasmussen is a spiritual teacher, right? A shaman focused on truth and light. Is he really suggesting that the military-industrial complex lying to the global public for 80 years, running sophisticated psychological operations on their own citizens, and actively ruining the lives and careers of whistleblowers, that all of that might have actually been justified?
It sounds counterintuitive.
But that is an astronomically huge claim. Is it possible we genuinely weren't spiritually or culturally mature enough as a species to handle this information without destroying ourselves?
It is a deeply uncomfortable thought, especially for those who value transparency and democracy, but it requires us to look objectively at human psychology and global politics over the last century.
Okay, let's look at the context.
We have to unpack the paternalistic nature of the cover-up. Let's look at the exact era when this cover-up supposedly began in earnest, the late 1940s, right after World War II.
Right, around Roswell.
Exactly. Humanity had just invented and deployed atomic weapons. The global psyche was deeply, deeply traumatized. The world was immediately gripped by the terrifying, binary, us versus them paranoia of the Cold War.
A Red Scare.
Society was highly institutionalized, socially rigid, and deeply reliant on absolute authority figures. If the United States government had stepped up to a podium in 1947 and said, hey, there are vehicles flying in our airspace that completely defy our physics. We cannot stop them, we cannot communicate with them, and we have no idea what they want, what would the genuine reaction have been?
Given the fragility of that specific era, absolute unmitigated panic.
Total chaos.
The global stock markets would have collapsed overnight. Major religions might have fractured into extremist doomsday cults. And honestly, the military, functioning purely on Cold War adrenaline, might have triggered a global nuclear exchange just out of sheer terror of the unknown.
They would have shot first and asked questions later.
Because that was the mindset.
Precisely. The origin of the cover-up wasn't necessarily born out of cartoonish mustache-twirling evil. It was heavily driven by deeply human institutional fear. The authorities themselves were terrified by their own impotence, so they assumed the public would be utterly paralyzed.
It was a paternalistic decision.
Very much so. We must hide the truth to maintain social order and prevent mass hysteria.
Okay, I can see the logic for 1947.
But Rasmussen's point hinges entirely on two words, until now. Because over the last 80 years, a massive, quiet shift has occurred in the collective human consciousness. The evidence didn't stay hidden. It trickled out.
It leaked.
Brave individuals, experiencers, pilots, authors, spiritual seekers were willing to look at the phenomenon, to share their stories, to write books, to host deep conversations, and to gradually acclimate the human mind to this reality.
We've basically been slowly inoculated.
Yes. We have had decades of science fiction exploring every possible scenario of first contact, acting as a psychological shock absorber. We have seen a massive global resurgence in spiritual seeking, meditation, and the study of consciousness.
The internet happened.
Right, we are connected by global communication networks that bypass traditional gatekeepers. We are, as a collective species, fundamentally more spiritually, scientifically, and psychologically resilient today than we were in 1947.
So the cover-up outlived its original, arguably protective usefulness.
Completely outlived it.
It went from being a questionable but perhaps necessary shock absorber for a fragile post-war society to becoming an archaic, oppressive dam holding back the natural spiritual evolution of human awareness.
The training wheels are rusting.
And it's time to take them off.
Yeah.
And now the dam is visibly breaking. Which brings us to what might actually happen in the immediate future. Because if the public is finally ready and the dam is breaking, we aren't just looking at vague admissions about blurry lights in the night sky.
It's getting much more specific.
Rasmussen's sources, combined with recent staggering statements from actual government and military officials, are pointing towards something much more tangible. And honestly, it is a lot closer to home than distant galaxies.
Yes, the conversation surrounding disclosure is rapidly shifting its vector right now. We are moving away from the abstract, mind-numbing vastness of deep space and turning our focus toward the immediate, tangible reality of our own planet.
Specifically, the deep ocean. This is the part that genuinely gives people chills. High-ranking government officials and intelligence whistleblowers have recently admitted to being briefed on the existence of deep-sea alien bases.
It's a huge revelation.
And Rasmussen notes that this specific detail, the reality of submerged non-human infrastructure, may be confirmed very soon. We have spent decades pointing our massive radio telescopes up at the stars, waiting for a faint, crackling signal from millions of light years away, and it turns out we probably should have been looking down into the Mariana Trench.
Which perfectly reinforces the shamanic premise we started with. They have been here all along.
It's brilliant tactically.
Think about the tactical and spiritual logic of the oceans. The oceans cover more than 70% of our planet's surface, and human beings have explored a tiny, almost negligible fraction of them.
We know more about the surface of the moon.
Exactly. The deep sea is an incredibly hostile environment for humans, but it is the perfect, undisturbed environment for a highly advanced intelligence to operate, observe, and coexist without constant interference from a noisy, terrestrial, land-based species.
It's the ultimate stealth base.
But this shift in focus from they're coming from out there in the cosmos to they are already down there in our oceans forces a massive psychological adjustment. It takes the phenomenon out of the realm of abstract astronomy and makes it intensely intimate. It makes it local.
So the immediate question for the listener becomes, if you encounter this reality head-on, how do you actually handle it?
Practically speaking.
Right. If tomorrow the news confirms that the truth is literally sharing our planetary real estate, how do you process that without spiraling back into that primal panic? This is where we really need to give you a practical toolkit, because Rasmussen doesn't just offer high-minded philosophy, he offers actionable, grounded guidance for encountering the profound.
He is a very practical teacher.
He says that if you find yourself facing this reality, whether that is physically seeing a craft, having a profound interaction with a light form, or even just processing the undeniable mental confirmation of deep-sea bases on the news, your first mandate is to consciously replace fear with curiosity.
That is the crucial pivot.
He advises approaching the phenomenon with caution, documenting your experience if possible, and seeking out expert opinions to help integrate it. But the absolute most important word he uses, the cornerstone of the shamanic approach to the unknown, is discernment.
Discernment is the vital mechanism for spiritual and psychological safety. Let's break down exactly why that specific word is so critical in this context.
Why not just unconditional love for everything?
Well, in modern New Age communities, there is sometimes a naive, almost romantic tendency to assume that any being from the spirit realm, or any non-human intelligence, must automatically be an omniscient, benevolent angel here to fix our planetary issues.
Toxic positivity on a cosmic scale.
Exactly. But the shamanic tradition is much older, much more grounded, and far more practical. Shamans interact with a vast, incredibly diverse ecology of spirits, energies, and intelligences. They understand that just because an entity is non-human or operates at a higher frequency, that does not automatically make it safe, wise, or aligned with your highest good.
So it's a mixed bag.
The universe is a very diverse ecosystem. There are profound teachers and guides, yes, but there are also tricksters, there are indifferent observers, and there are energetic predators.
So you basically have to use the exact same boundaries and critical thinking skills you would use with anyone you meet here on Earth.
Precisely.
Let's expand on an analogy here to make this really concrete. Imagine you were dropped right into the middle of a massive, bustling, intensely foreign city that you have never visited before.
Okay. You don't speak the native language. You don't fully understand the local customs or the unspoken rules of the streets. Now, how do you act? You should absolutely keep an open mind. You should be deeply curious about the locals. You should try the incredible new food. You should admire the breathtaking architecture. And you should be entirely open to making wonderful, life-changing new friends.
You enjoyed the experience.
But you still lock the doors to your hotel room at night?
Oh, absolutely.
You still don't blindly walk down a pitch-black alley at 3 in the morning with your wallet out just because a stranger asks you to? You trust your gut instincts. If an interaction gives you a bad vibe, You maintain your boundaries and you just walk away.
Spiritual discernment with non-human intelligence is the exact same thing.
You do not let fear paralyze you from experiencing the incredible beauty and wonder of the cosmic city, but you also do not let naive, wide-eyed wonder blind you to potential dangers.
That analogy perfectly captures the required balance. And it applies directly to how we should mentally digest the coming disclosure through the media when we are watching the news.
Yes. When you hear the news, use your discernment. Do not blindly accept the fear-mongering narrative from defense contractors claiming that these beings are a dire threat to national security that requires trillions of your tax dollars and space weapons to defeat.
Don't buy the fear.
But simultaneously, do not blindly accept a passive, savior-complex narrative that these beings are infallible cosmic angels who are going to descend, fix climate change, cure all diseases, and solve our political corruption for us.
They aren't here to do our homework.
You must maintain your sovereignty as a human being. You observe the phenomenon, you learn from it, you stay intensely curious, but you stay firmly grounded in your own reality and your own responsibility to this planet.
Which brings us full circle right back to Rasmussen's core stabilizing mantra, keep calm and carry on. The ultimate takeaway from this deep dive into the shamanic perspective isn't about learning how to build an anti-gravity spaceship or deciphering the political structure of some galactic federation.
No, it's deeply personal.
It is about actively replacing the paralyzing fear of the unknown with the empowering, open-hearted curiosity of the explorer. When the news breaks, you still have to choose to live your life. You still have to chop wood and carry water.
You still have to pay the mortgage on that house with the newly discovered, incredibly crowded sub-basement.
Exactly. But now you get to do it with a vastly richer, deeper, and infinitely more magnificent understanding of your place in the cosmic neighborhood.
It is the beautiful, necessary integration of the profound and the mundane. The disclosure of non-human intelligence isn't the end of the world. It is simply the end of our artificial, self-imposed isolation.
We are just rejoining the larger community.
It's an invitation for humanity to step out onto the cosmic porch, take a deep breath, and finally realize we have always had neighbors.
Let's bring all these complex threads together for you as we wrap this up. Tomorrow, or next week, or next year, whenever the government finally decides the dam can no longer hold and they hold that definitive press conference, remember the framework we unpacked today.
Ground yourself in it.
This isn't a sudden, terrifying rupture in the fabric of reality. This is a 15,000-year-old open secret, finally, inevitably, reaching the mainstream consciousness. We are finally moving past the era of the paternalistic cover-up, recognizing that our collective human consciousness is finally mature enough to handle the truth.
And whatever form that truth takes.
Right. Whether these beings are operating physical crafts from deep-sea bases in our oceans, or whether they are benevolent light forms traveling effortlessly through space-time portals to observe us, their existence does not break your spiritual practices.
It expands them.
It is the ultimate proof that the Creator's canvas is infinitely larger, more diverse, and more beautiful than we ever dared to imagine.
If you are seeking more resources on this topic and you want to truly integrate this into your own life, I highly recommend digging into the source material we utilize today.
Where should they look?
Jon Rasmussen's book, Common Threads, is an unparalleled resource for weaving these ancient, indigenous shamanic traditions into our hectic modern reality. He's also incredibly accessible to the public. You can reach out to his practice directly at jon@dreamingintobeing.com and explore his podcast links for deeper guided meditations on these exact subjects. The tools for mental and spiritual integration are out there, waiting for you to use them.
We will definitely make sure to put all of those links right in the show notes for you to easily access. But before we finish up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final, provocative thought.
Something to think about.
Something for you to actively mull over tomorrow morning while you are drinking your coffee, looking up at the sky, or watching the news anchors scramble. We spend almost all of our time and energy wondering about them. What do they look like? How does their propulsion work? What are their intentions? Are they a threat to us?
We project so much outward.
We really do. But if the shamanic perspective is accurate, if beings of light have been traveling through frequency portals to observe us, or subtly guide us, or simply share this planetary space with us for millennia, then perhaps the most important question isn't, are we alone?
The real question we should be asking is entirely reflective.
Yes. The question we desperately need to ask ourselves is, what kind of cosmic neighbors have we been this whole time while they were watching? Let that one simmer. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.